1968 was a difficult year. The Vietnam War, when it was initially started back in the late 50s, early 60s, everybody was gung-ho, we're going to save Vietnam from the communists. But toward the end of 68, it was getting very bogged down. A lot of Americans were getting killed, nothing really was happening, we weren't winning the war. So there was a lot of protests. In college, when I went to school, there were protests on campus. I went to school at Southern Connecticut. New Haven had a lot of protests, Yale. It was very controversial at that point. A lot of people were burning their draft cards, going to Canada, that type of thing. I was born in Bridgeport, and I grew up in Stratford, Connecticut. Went to Bunnell High School, graduated in 1964. We weren't very well off. As a kid, I used to deliver papers to earn extra money, help the family out. And I always worked part-time during high school. And going to college, I worked every summer. 1 year stocking shelves in a supermarket. And the last 3 years, I worked for Sherwood Island State Park. I went to college during the Vietnam War, and while you were going to college, you were what they called deferred, which meant you couldn't get drafted until you graduated. So I graduated in June of 1968, and I was drafted in November, 5 months later. You're drafted for a period of time, is 2 years at that time. I was drafted in Bridgeport, and I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training, which was 8 weeks. And then from there, I was shipped to Fort Rucker, Alabama for a year in the United States. And then from Fort Rucker, I went to Vietnam. And I only spent 5 months in Vietnam. I originally went there had 8 months to go in my service time, but they allowed us to apply for graduate school toward the end of your draft time. And I was accepted, so they knocked off 3 months off of my time in Vietnam. So I actually served a total of 21 months. Well, my job in the Army officially was a psychiatric social worker. It was my official job. And I got that because I had majored in social sciences in college. So as a college grad, they figured I didn't really need any training to do whatever it was that they wanted me to do. So I worked in mental health clinics. I worked in Vietnam. You were just a jack of all trades. I was assigned to a medical unit. I drove ambulances. I had guard duty. I went on patrols. I went on missions out to the villages. Everything. My official job was in social work, and I did spend some time working in the mental health clinic. And part of that was people who had traumas, mental problems, people that wanted to get out of the Army for various reasons. We had to interview them and give a recommendation and all that kind of stuff. So, officially, I was a social worker. Our unit invaded Cambodia, went into Cambodia in 1970, and when we came back, there's a lot of cases of malaria. So we had to treat a lot of the malaria cases where fevers are very high, 106 degrees fever. So we had to actually get ice, which is hard to come by, and just pack armpits and groins and everything with ice to get the fever down. So that was a big part of what we did. Typical night when we got raided by the Viet Cong would be probably nothing would happen before 10:30, because the Viet Cong knew that it usually lights out in the barracks at 10 o'clock. So 10:30, everything would happen. They would raid the camp. They would fire rockets and mortars, and everything would happen. So everybody's up and they're running and scrambling and everything. But generally, that would end about 1:30 to 2 o'clock, because Vietnamese knew that if they came into the camp and we were fighting, they needed a few hours to get out of the camp before daylight. And daylight was about 5 o'clock in the morning. So that was the schedule, between 10:30 and 2. And by 2 o'clock, you know, under all those conditions of getting attacked, you're pretty wired, so you really just don't sleep anymore. So that was... in Vietnam, I was in the central part of the country called the Central Highlands, a beautiful country with a lot of mountains and that kind of thing, in a little outside of a little town called An Khe, which was the base camp of the 4th Infantry Division. That was what I was in, 4th Infantry Division. And I spent all my time there. We hired civilians to come in. Ladies would come in and they would do laundry. Men would come in for cooks and do various maintenance things. They hired a lot of local civilians. And the civilians are very nice. I really liked them. They liked us. You know. So, unit, we would go out to the villages. And where I was in the mountains, they had a lot of what they call the mountain yard people. If you picture a typical Vietnamese person has, you know, kind of looks very Oriental. I'll describe it that way. The mountain yard people were very different looking. They were dark skinned, round eyes, very much like a native person, you know. And those were the villages that we went out. We went out and we would have medical missions there where people would just line up, come into the dispensary, and all of us would, whatever they needed done, they would have scratches or they would be sick, needed shots, bandages, whatever. We would just do whatever needed to be done. That was nice. And then the village elders would always figure that we were a good source of work. So toward the end of the day, they would help. We'd have to help them like build houses and clean stuff and whatever they wanted. We did. They really liked us, and we liked them. And that was a really good experience for me. We had a lot of good friends. I made a lot of good friends with the little mountain yard boys and girls. You know, I have a lot of pictures at home of them. And very honest people. I mean, they would, the mountain yard kids that you would meet, if for some reason you had a wallet and it was hurting your, you know, inside of your pants, is, you know, you wanted somebody to hold it, you'd give it to one of these mountain yard kids. And you could be absolutely certain by the end of the day they'd give it back to you. They would follow you around all day to make sure that they didn't lose you because they wanted to give you your wallet back. Some of the other kids you'd run into, you give them your wallet and you turn around and they were gone. You know? But very, very honest people, really, really liked them. Well, a lot of people suffer from nightmares and trauma, and you know, I had nightmares for probably 6 months after I came home. Would wake up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat and, you know, yelling and everything like that. But they eventually went away. You know, when you serve in a war area, you know, you're scared. You know, you're scared all the time. Most of the war was fought at night where we were, you know, and you got very little sleep, you know, and that you know, very stressful for a long time to do that. But it went away. But a lot of men and women that came back that still suffer from those traumas today. You know? Psychological trauma, very, very real. Yeah. I think about it a lot. I think most people do. When you go to war, it's kind of a life-changing experience. You know, you learn about a lot about yourself. I learned that I was patriotic. You know, I got drafted and I went and served my country. I learned what fear was. I learned what it was to be brave, courageous. So you learn a lot, you know. And I took 12 credits toward a master's degree in urban sociology. That's what I was majoring in. But at that point, I ran out of money, so I had to go get a job. Yeah, so that's. I was on the GI Bill. The GI Bill was, the government said, look, if you go back to school and you served in the military, we'll pay for your school for a certain period of time, a certain amount. And I took advantage of that. I got, but it was only for a limited time, so it really wasn't that much. Yeah, got a job working for an insurance company, and I worked for them for about 5 years. And then after that, I went from there to a company that manufactures paper in Stamford, and I worked for them for 25 years. That was a good career in insurance. You know? And yeah, got married, as you know. Yeah. 3 kids, 2 grandkids now. A couple of nice nephews and nieces. Some of the others, we made lists of, when we were there, of all our names and addresses, and we said, oh, we'll keep in contact with you. It never seemed to happen, you know. Sometimes, you know, you wonder on Facebook if you went out, if you would find them. You know, we've done that a couple of times. Haven't found anybody, though.